Is building your own swimming pool a good idea? Well, it's such a general question. And the first thing that I would say back to you if you asked me that, would you build your own house? And if you'd laugh and be like, no, that's ridiculous. I would never build my own house. So anyway, back to the swimming pool. Should I build my own swimming pool? Those two projects are much closer than you might think that they are. Building a swimming pool is a lot like building a house. There's multiple trades involved. You're, digging something into the ground. It looks a lot like a foundation, and there's plumbing and electrical. And I mean, everything's got to work right. You can't have something wrong with it. Like you build the whole house, except the roof isn't done right, so it leaks. Well, that's a problem, right? You can't build a swimming pool except for, I don't know, the interior surface or lack of waterproofing, or you use Jello instead of plumbing lines. Like, I mean, you can't miss an integral component, but the average person could build their own swimming pool. I mean, we've all heard of people building their own houses, and that's really what it comes down to. Where is your technical proficiency? And it could be anything. Like, you could be somebody who's never built a thing in your life. If you've never built a thing in your life, probably you don't want to build a swimming pool. Like, it's huge. There's a lot going on with a swimming pool, and there's a lot of ways that you could totally ruin the project. Like, you make one small error that you didn't know about. You've never heard of it before, in fact, but as it turns out, it's a huge problem, and there's no way to fix it once the job's done. Or maybe you have to take some steps backwards that involves taking out something like a brand new stamped concrete deck that you poured. Except if you used the wrong glue or the wrong pipe or the wrong bedding material, or you didn't run the lines properly, now you have to dig up your plumbing lines, and you have to do that through that brand new stamped concrete deck. So these things do happen, and it's usually a result from people kind of getting over their heads in terms of their technical proficiency. The way that I would address that is say, if you would build your own house, then you should build your own swimming pool, or you could build your own swimming pool. If you would never dream of building your own house, probably don't build your own pool. But there's a lot of gray area there. I would say a pool is probably not quite as hard as a house. It's not as elaborate of a project, depending on what kind of pool you're building here. But the average backyard residential pool is going to be less elaborate than a house build, but it's going to be pretty similar overall. So if you did decide to build your own pool, would you save a lot of money? You would save a huge amount of money. This is probably the main number one attracting point that people are going after to build your own pool is like, look, I got a quote for a pool build, and it was like $100,000, $200,000, $400,000. These aren't made up numbers. These are pools going in these days. It's extraordinarily expensive to have swimming pools built. I mean, it's such a massive luxury, and we're in such a boom period right now. Materials and skilled labor are in scarce supply, so prices basically are through the roof. You might not even be able to get a pool anymore. You might have been planning on hiring somebody to build a pool for you, and then you got pricing in place, and it's like, this is not even close to what I was expecting to pay. Like, even right now, in filming this, it's 2022, May of 2022, and 2 years ago, a pool that was, let's say, $50,000. That pool is at least $75,000 now, and it's only 2 years later. So prices are kind of going crazy right now, and there's a huge financial incentive to build your own swimming pool. So what if you have some technical proficiency and you're definitely attracted to the idea of saving some money? Something that you want to think about is choose a design that is going to give you a high likelihood for success. And by that, what I mean is first of all, there's three different kinds of pools, primarily three different kinds of pools: fiberglass, vinyl liner, and concrete of one description or another, like tile or shotcrete or gunite. Those are all concrete pools. So what kind are you going to build? And if you're like, oh yeah, concrete for sure, because it's the best. First, I agree with you. Concrete is the best. It's great for building swimming pools. It's not the kind of process you can just do on your own. Even with all the best intentions in the world, there's a couple of steps involved with building a concrete pool that you need experience for. Like, you can't hope to do it without experience. And if you're thinking, well, just subcontract those stages out, yes, maybe, but you are introducing the potential for problems. You're introducing somebody else's timeline. You're raising the costs again. There's a bunch of stuff going on there that you now no longer have control over, and you're kind of more in a situation where you're hiring somebody else to do your pool again. is that a good idea for you? Well, I mean, it might be, depending on what you're trying to build, but for a lot of people, it might not be. Like, wouldn't it be better if you just had control over the entire job and you chose a design where you didn't have to bring in outside help because there were no stages that were just too hard for you to do on your own? Easy example, that concrete pool we were just talking about, why not just build a vinyl pool? Like, vinyl pools have really elevated in recent years, and they're pretty great nowadays as well. They're a lot more inexpensive, and they're a lot easier to install, technically speaking. Like, the interior surface of a pool is kind of the hard part for a swimming pool. And with a concrete pool especially, you're talking plaster, you're talking tile, something like that. These are harder to do technically than you think they might be. Putting a liner, not quite as hard. I mean, even if you've never put a liner in your life, if you really studied up on the subject, or maybe you got a little bit of help from somebody with a little bit of experience, you could probably put a liner in a pool successfully, especially if you chose a design that kind of lends itself to being easy to install the liner in. Like ledges, where you'd put like lounge chairs, liner over steel steps and benches. Those are much more difficult. Like, if you just want to install a rectangle pool and you'd be totally happy with just a basic rectangle pool, well, I mean, that's pretty easy to do. You could probably do that on your own without having to rely on subcontractors, which are going to increase your price and take away some of the control that you have over this project. So, I mean, there's a lot to consider there. But what I want you to think about is you come to the table here with a lack of experience. You don't build swimming pools, so your experience level is low. And maybe your skill level is a little bit low as well, unless you're, perhaps a tradesperson in another discipline. But what you have is a very, very high level of caring about this project. Like, I mean, you care big time whether this thing works or not. You couldn't be more invested in a positive outcome here. And I tell you what, the people that you hire that are working in your backyard, they do not share that mentality. I'm not saying everybody's a scumbag, but like, it's not their pool. It's not their house. They don't care about it as much as you do. And that whole thing where it's like, good enough. That good enough moment could mean the difference between you digging up your plumbing in 10 years versus this pool lasting 50 years before you need to dig up anything. And so that's what you have. You have a better ability to care about the project and really invest yourself in a positive outcome, even if it takes longer. You don't really care if it takes longer because, first of all, you're not waiting on somebody else. Like right now, if you called the closest pool place to you and said, build me a pool, money's not an object, they'd set you up for 2 years from now. They're busy. They're booked solid. They've already been, getting permits and taking deposits from other people. So you take back a little bit of the timeline. You have more budget available to play with because you're not spending on somebody else's labor costs. And, you're not getting overcharged for that labor. You're going to learn real soon. Like, building a swimming pool is one heck of a lot of work. And it does take a lot of experience because one small technical error or a series of technical errors when you build this pool can result in totally compromised longevity. So there is definitely some pros, but also some cons when you talk about building your own pool. Should you do it? It really comes down to a case-by-case basis. But I'll tell you what, there's a reason that professionals exist. And even amongst professionals, I mean, you get some pools which are higher quality and some pools which are lower quality because it is a technical process, a lot like building a house. You have good houses and you have bad houses that get built. Pools are much the same. Go into it with your eyes open. Know what you're getting into if you decide to build your own swimming pool. Choose a design that lends itself well to success. Take your time, study each of the stages, reach out for help where you can. I think this would all be good advice to somebody who is thinking about building their own swimming pool. I hope you found this information helpful. Please like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And you can check out my website, swimmingpoolsteve.com.